The tour begins in the city of Cusco, where we'll be looking at megalithic marvels such as this wall made of basalt, as well as the Coricancha, which again is an incredible construction that could not have been done by the Inca, and so therefore is thousands upon thousands of years older. Look at the incredible accuracy. This wall is about 1 meter thick and has perfect joinery. The gaps you see in the vertical surfaces are as the result of an ancient cataclysmic event, probably an earthquake. Then we're also going to go to Sacsayhuaman, which is above Cusco, and we're going to look at many of the megalithic marvels there. For example, this little tunnel called a chincana that you can walk through. As well, this giant outcropping of stone, which is also called chincana, is something that very few tourists see, but stories say that this is the entrance to a massive tunnel that goes down into and under the city of Cusco. We'll also see lots of examples of ancient cataclysmic damage, such as this, and of course the huge and magnificent wall at Sacsayhuaman. Some of these stones are up to 120 tons in size, and again, there's no way that the Inca constructed it. The Inca found it approximately 1,000 years ago when they first entered Cusco in the area, and they did repairs to it, which you can see above. The small rubble-like stones are the result of Inca reconstruction. But these massive stones still fit almost perfectly together and could not have been done by any known human civilization. There is also another place called Kenko, and Kenko is a series of labyrinths that we will be exploring, such as here. Again, this was not an Inca construction, but was found by the Inca and utilized by them as a place to prepare the royal mummies of the royal Inca people. And then after that, we're going to visit this massive wall outside of Cusco, again made of basalt. Note the superior work below and inferior work above. Again, the work on top was done by the Inca. This megalithic aspect was what they found. And we'll also be exploring the fascinating wiki skeleton, which DNA testing has shown is probably some kind of hybrid. So wiki has been DNA tested 3 times. First by a Russian crew that did not give the results to Senor Renato, who was the caretaker. And then by a British crew who took some of the sections of ribs to be analyzed, did not give Senor Renato the results. And finally we tested wiki, and it turns out her mother was Native American of the haplogroup B4. So what was her father? We're going to do another DNA test probably in November of 2018. And we're going to attempt to see if we can detect the DNA of the father, which is the nuclear DNA, and also the mitochondrial, which is the mother, to see if indeed it is B4, Native American. We'll also be exploring a little museum in a small town called Wado, where strange ancient artifacts such as this stone that had to have been drilled by some kind of tube drill is located. Again, very few people go there. And after that, we're going to Pisac, which is like a smaller version of Machu Picchu, located high above the Sacred Valley of Peru. And as you can see, it's an astonishing example of Inca terracing. So this is an amazing site that the Inca largely created, but there are also megalithic aspects. And of course, a trip to Peru would not be complete without magnificent Machu Picchu. So we will be spending almost an entire day exploring this amazing world wonder and focusing on not only its beauty, but of course on megalithic aspects such as this, the so-called Temple of Three Windows. And then we'll also see evidence of ancient cataclysmic damage that would have destroyed this place partially before the time of the Inca. The Inca found Machu Picchu in ruins and they built their city around it. And this is the iconic hitching post of the sun, the Intihuatana, that we will also be seeing. This again is likely pre-Inca. And as well in the Sacred Valley, we're going to see Ollantaytambo. Here you see this fascinating stone that has strange scoop marks on it. Is this an example of lost ancient high technology? As well as this fountain that does this magic trick. This is engineering as the result of surface tension. So this is something that the Inca likely did. And then we climb up to the top of Ollantaytambo, at least 500 feet above the valley floor, and we'll be inspecting some of the finest of the ancient pre-Inca megalithic work located here. This could very well be some of the finest megalithic stone fitting on the planet. And finally, we're off to the coast of Peru at Paracas. And this is where the real focus on the ancient elongated skulls will take place. Now the royal Paracas people had elongated skulls and also had red hair, as is depicted here with their god called Kon. So we'll be visiting two museums that have great examples of elongated skulls. And of course, you can't go to the area without flying over the Nazca lines, which we will be doing from the city of Ica. So here in the middle of the frame, you can see the famous hummingbird. But we'll be flying for more than an hour, so we'll be able to see much more than what most tourists see. We'll also be exploring the area called Palpa that has hundreds, if not more than 1,000, of these fascinating geoglyphs and figures. Are we good?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, this has physical characteristics. It's not a huge skull because this was a young person. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, only 17. So it's not probably 13 years old or something. But it has the classic features. The back of the skull is rounded, so you're not going to achieve that with cranial deformation. Cranial deformation flattens the front and the back. And then it has this protuberance here, which is also not part of cranial deformation. So this is a characteristic of a natural Paracas elongated skull. Then we have this suture, which is quite obvious. And this suture, which is supposed to be there in all of us, does not exist. If it had fused, there would be a raised area, there'd be a raised ridge, but it's not there whatsoever. And then these are the two holes in the back of the skull, and these are similar. They're called foramen, and we have them here. It's in the lower part of your jaw, and that is for feeding nerve and blood flow. So this is a genetic characteristic as the result of the fact that this person was born with this shape of skull. And as well, like I said, these little bones here, we don't have these little bones. Only the Inca are supposed to have them. So there's a good likelihood that when the Nazca people invaded about 100 AD, that they tried to exterminate the royal Paracas people, but some escaped, and they took an ancient road that goes from Paracas directly to Cusco. Oh, also, yeah. Okay, here's the foramen magnum. Now in us, it's located here. With the Paracas, it's 2.5 centimeters back, so that's a genetic characteristic. You can't achieve that with head binding because you would choke the person within 30 seconds. So that characteristic by itself is telling you that this is not Homo sapiens sapiens. And then this one, again, this one has the 2 holes in the back of the skull. You can see there. But there is flattening of the back of the forehead. So this is the transition. You started out with the Paracas being completely natural in shape, like the one I just showed. And then over the course of time, they began to breed with normal-looking people. And the genetic characteristics of the normal people started to become dominant, and that's when they started cranial deformation, with the final example being what I showed you back there. This, you know, the size of the skull is quite large. The volume might be 25% larger than a normal human, and it has other genetic characteristics too. Like it has a suture line coming down this way, which we saw up at Andahuaylias. And again, this is not something which is found in us. We're born with this suture line, but it disappears very soon after birth. So the fact that it's not fused is another genetic anomaly. And then again here, you see that the foramen magnum is as far back as possible. If it was to be farther back, it would be outside of the skull. So this again tells us that that genetic anomaly by itself means that also the foramen magnum is quite a bit smaller than a normal human. And so the medical doctors who have looked at this and the fact that the hole is narrower in diameter would mean that they have longer necks than normal. Like thinner and longer necks, which means their whole mode of motion would be different. And then this is a normal baby human who died prior to the fontanelle closing. So this means this individual died probably somewhere around 1 year old. And actually it has this suture line coming down here too. And then we have this one. So you see this one is very different, subtly quite different from a normal human being. The eye socket is not round, which is indicative of a normal human female, and it's not angular, which would be indicative of a normal human male. It's actually angled back this way, and it has these very strange protuberances coming out of the front of its face, and no evidence of ever having had teeth. So if this was a human being, this would be in the region of 16 months to 2 years old. And it also, yeah, so this is very anomalous. And the sinuses are very different too if you compare with the normal human. Very narrow and not totally developed. And if you look on the inside, the sinuses do not continuously go back. They start out with this very strange oblong shape, and then inside there's only a narrow little circle. So doctors who've looked at this have no idea what it is. And Senior Juan, it was his belief that this is an alien-human hybrid. So the reason why I'm wearing gloves is the fact that this has not been DNA tested. And we're going to take material from here, which is where there's bone marrow, and that's the best place to take material for DNA. Again, you don't take it from the surface because that could be contaminated, but if you drill in and let the powder come out and then drill deeper and deeper. Then under sterile conditions, you take that powder and we're going to send that to Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, Ontario, Canada. And in the back, we have the full range. Again, these are all local.
Live TV, I've got it right here.
I found this one about 2 years ago. And again, you see this massive bump that's on the forehead. And also the fact that the back of the skull is rounded. So it's highly unlikely this is cranial deformation. But this is obvious. This is an obvious example of cranial deformation because you have the flattening of the back, the flattening of the front, the volume is normal. So this would be the tail end of the Paracas culture. This would be where most of the DNA would be normal human, as contrasted to this design, for example. This is more the Tutankhamun kind of shape. This shape is only found in one cemetery called Cerro Colorado. So there could have been different levels of society with different shaped skulls, and the shape indicated what class they were. This may have been the priestly class, this may have been the chiefly nobility. But the largest ones, like this one and that one, are found in one 10-hectare area. This is another good example on the bottom. So in one 10-hectare area on planet Earth, we find the largest of the elongated skulls, and the only ones that look similar are found in the Black Sea and Caspian Sea and Crimea area. They're almost identical in shape, and the genetics of the Paracas, we did 18 skulls sampled. One, we got no result. In 2, we got Native American result, and all the others were DNA common to the Black Sea, Caspian Sea, and Crimea area. So we're looking at the possible migration of an ancient subhuman or subspecies of human migrating from Eurasia about 3,000 to 3,500 years ago, likely being forced out of their homeland by an invading group of human beings.